Thank you for joining us today. This is the third webinar in Brooks's RTI and Early Childhood webinar series. We're glad you're watching. My name is Christina Davis and I am the Marketing Manager for Early Childhood Books at Brooks Publishing. In today's webinar, you will learn about the importance of proactive assessment in order to identify young children with challenging behaviors who are at risk for problems in their formal school years. Dr. Andy Frey and Dr. Ed Feil are with us today to present the webinar and share their expertise in the area of social-emotional assessment of young children. Dr. Frey is an associate professor in the Kent School of Social Work at the University of Louisville, where he focuses his energies on the prevention and intervention of challenging behavior with young children and their families. His primary interests are positive behavior support and social and emotional competence in preschoolers. As senior scientist at Oregon Research Institute, Dr. Feil's research interests include early screening of child behavior problems, home and school interventions, and interactive technologies. His current project at Oregon Research Institute, for which Dr. Feil serves as the principal investigator, is expanding the reach of evidence-based interventions for improving social-emotional outcomes for infants in child care. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Frey and Dr. Feil so that you can learn how to address behavioral concerns using an RTI approach and provide appropriate levels of support and intervention. You can take it away, guys.
Great. Well, thanks very much. This is Ed. I want to thank you for being on the webinar and going through this presentation with us. I think for both Andy and I, this is a new format, so this will be interesting, and would love to get your feedback, and hope to keep it engaging and have everybody learn something. So just to start off with the objectives. So this presentation is pulled from one of the chapters in the RTI and Early Childhood book. And so wanted to talk about the rationale and background, why we're doing this. I guess I feel like I'm probably speaking to the, preaching to the choir on this one, but I think having the rationale and background is really important for our work. As you start going out and trying to promote these practices, people need to know why, and it's really important to provide that foundation. Then going on to the RTI framework itself, response to intervention, and how it dovetails with assessment, screening, progress monitoring, and assessment. Then we're going to be going over, then Andy's going to take it over and talking about resources, the early screening project, the behavior incident reporting system, and database decision making. And then finally we're going to wrap up with, where are we going to go from here and kind of future directions. So to start off, Andy and I want to just to get a sense of, what describes your role. Try to see, where folks are coming from. Are you direct teaching staff, administrators, resource teacher, consultant? I think school psychologist probably fits into that, school social worker, or none of the above.
So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll right now so everybody can submit their answers.
And I'll break into the silence to say hello, everybody. This is Andy Frey. Glad to be here.
Great. So it looks like the majority of people are resource teachers, 46%, and 28% administrator, 23% none of the above. So perhaps you can maybe type into the question box or something, give us a sense of who you are as a none of the above. So I've closed the poll now, so.
Okay, well, I'm going to move on, I think.
Great.
With the group we have, I think this is going to fit right into your work. That with screening, assessment, progress monitoring. That's really something that you all are doing all the time. So
would you like
this
me?
should fit what you're doing.
I can just go through quickly what our responses were. So we have a technical assistance provider, county inclusion specialist. Let's see. Social emotional behavior specialist, state level staff.
Great. I think this is a really influential group. I think really the folks that are making the decisions out there as far as in the field. So welcome. So the next question we have is, and we're trying to keep this as interactive as we can, I think. Sometimes listening to these webinars, it gets a little long, but also to try to get a sense of, where, what describes your program? Are you Head Start, early Head Start, child care, pre-K, home-based, or none of the above? So Christina, could you launch that poll?
It is launched, and people are taking it, and it looks like the majority are pre-K, and then Head Start, early Head Start, and then a lot of none of the aboves again. So if you could go ahead and type into the question pane, and then I can share with our presenters what best describes your program.
Great, and just to let folks know, I don't see the poll, so I'm sorry if I'm asking too many questions.
Let's see, an early learning coalition, family literacy program, center-based and home-based child care, education providers.
Neat, this is a diverse group.
Yeah, all right, so I'm going to close this poll now, and so we can proceed with the presentation.
Great, well I think this group is going to really see, even with all these different areas, I think there's some real commonalities here, and we've got some good folks to collect our assessment data from as far as the different places. We're going to be talking about where who do you collect data from, and the importance of having a diverse data source in order to make the best decisions. And I think everyone here is going to be able to chime in, so I'm looking forward to the discussion at the end. So I think starting off, as far as social emotional and the kids that we're looking at, how prevalent are these kids? Are they really that much of an issue? They're a pretty small amount. You talk about, I always say 5%, or anywhere between 2 and 6% of the population. But the issue that we're talking about is that these kids, frequently remain chronic over time, and that a small amount of kids are responsible for a lot of our aggressive, our discipline problems. They're taking up our time. And so being able to focus on these kids, while it's a small number relative to the whole, is really going to make a big difference as far as our classroom environments, the effectiveness of our interventions. And that's why these kids are really important to look at. These kids are at more risk for a whole host of things, and I'm not saying that all of these kids are going to have all of these things, or that having any one of these things is indicative of necessarily having behavior problem or problems with social and emotional. But kids that do have aggressive behaviors, they're at the highest risk for peer rejection, delinquency, poor employment, poor academics, substance abuse, disrupted marriages. And I think the issue we're talking about here, I think, at least in the population, the early grades or the poor academics or poor, pre-academics as far as learning goes, but also peer rejection and creating kind of a negative cohort. There's a boy that I always talk about when I was back doing my practicum, Bo, who I came in to do an observation on, and as I'm sitting there, it took a little while for the referral to get through the system. So this was probably really close to winter break or right after winter break, and so the classroom had already been kind of his fertile ground, and I was doing observation, and he just walks past a little girl, and suddenly, she starts, pulling back and even starts tearing up and crying a little bit, and I looked and I saw, and I didn't see him, do anything aggressive to her or anything at all, just walking past. And I talked to the teacher later, and I learned that she had been his target before, and so that peer rejection, even though he wasn't doing anything there, was already starting to take hold. And when I was first doing intervention with Bo, I would go into the playground and start playing with the other kids and try to pull Bo in. And the other kids would say, no, Ed, don't do that. Don't bring Bo here. He's gonna mess up our good time. And these are kids that are 4-year-old kids that have known him for a little while. So I think some of the problems that these kids are having, stemming from the peer rejections and also from poor academics, is really going to follow them. And so addressing these children early on with assessment to get them effective intervention is going to be really important. I think of antisocial behavior as kind of like after 4th grade starts becoming a chronic condition. And this isn't really based on research. This is more kind of a gut feeling as far as when we're talking about. But some of the research has shown that if we don't intervene by grade 4, the antisocial behavior really starts to become a pattern, and that it becomes a chronic condition, much like diabetes, that it can be cured but managed. I myself have type 1 diabetes, and take my insulin all the time and manage it sometimes pretty well, but it's not going to be cured, and that's something that I'm going to be dealing with. If with children with behavior problems, if we don't let them, if we don't intervene early and we let them go, the chances for them being able to actually, quote unquote, fix or have a full, remission or not displaying that behavior is going to be pretty low. And that early intervention, and it's funny I'm not talking about assessment at this point, but assessment hopefully will lead to early intervention. In the school, home, and community is really the best hope of diverting these kids from the path towards developing more chronic antisocial behavior. And now I'm going to be pulling some research from, and this is done at Oregon Social Learning Center, Jerry Patterson, John Reed, and Tom DeShawn, looking at antisocial children. And they did a retrospective study where they interviewed and did chart reviews, case reviews on boys that had been in juvenile justice system, and they found 3 commonalities: that these boys brought an antisocial pattern to school. So they came to us already having some antisocial behavior. And I think for the group we're talking about here, the folks, especially the folks in Head Start, you're going to see these kids come in anytime it's a community daycare. These kids are coming in and they're already bringing aggressive behaviors. they're an early starter in the sense they get involved with the criminal justice system before fourth grade in some ways, and they're a chronic offender, so they continue on. And that they found that these three factors predicted 100% of violent male offenders. I think of these three things as kind of like a stool, and so each one has a leg, and on a tripod, you need three legs to be able to support it. But if you can pull one of those legs out, the whole thing falls down. But bringing the antisocial pattern to school, we can't, they come to us as they are. We can't affect that. But as far as being an early starter or a chronic offender, I think we have, through early assessment and early intervention, have that possibility to avoid later problems. This is more research from Oregon Social Learning Center, and this actually, this graph isn't in the chapter due to space limitations, but it's a great example. They followed two groups of boys. There was an antisocial group, and this is a group that already was exhibiting behavior problems both on the classroom and on the playground. And then the at-risk group is just a typical group of boys, but they happen to live in a high-crime, low-income area. And these are boys from the same schools. They just follow them over time. And as you can see, the antisocial group, that top bar, the blue bar, their arrest rates over time, and these are cumulative, every year we would count them up, and you would see that they just spiked right at 9th grade. We knew about these kids already in 4th grade. As you can see. Why did the arrest rate drop off after 9th grade? Was it developmental? Did they become less aggressive with time? Was there some kind of specialized intervention that was done while they were in high school, or they were incarcerated, so they had a lack of opportunity for offending?
There we go. I've just launched the poll, and I actually learned that I can share the results on the screen, so I will do that when the voting is done. Let's see. Obviously the incarceration is the winner here, 73% so far. Let me go ahead and close this poll and then show the results. There you go.
A smart group.
Okay.
I actually can't see the results. Can you read them to me?
Oh, you couldn't see the results. I'm sorry. So 73% say incarceration, 20% say specialized intervention, and 7% developmental. And we only got 85% of the votes because I closed it a bit early, so I apologize if you did not get your vote in.
Well, it's definitely a smart group. When I usually put this out, someone guesses it. But it's, typically, we really don't have a specialized intervention when kids are this age. So as you can see here, this drop-off happened because there was just a few boys. Actually, by this point, I think there was only probably about 10% of the sample that accounted for all these arrests. But we saw this difference right here already. Why didn't we intervene at this point? This would have been the time. But I think because there wasn't intervention, there was an assessment early that we weren't able to find these kids. And we know who these kids are, the characteristics of these problem behaviors. Less time on task, twice the number of negative interactions, peer rejection. We know this. When you set up a circle time or a center-based program, And there's a few centers that they can go through, and one of the boys, like Bo, goes through a set of activities that you thought would be about 40 minutes, and 5 minutes later he's done everything. That's less time on task. We know these kids. These negative interactions, we can see them. And these are happening with parents, siblings, teachers, and peers. And as the example too with Bo, that peer rejection. So what we can look at is two primary adjustments, to classroom or teacher expectations, and also peer expectations. So those are two important settings to look at as far as looking at doing assessment. And also we can look at behavior across two dimensions. One, externalizing behaviors. And I think folks are kind of familiar with these terms, hopefully. But it's not, that they have, these externalizing, that things are hanging outside of them, but that their behavior is more externalizing. They're aggressive. They're out there. It's too much behavior. I think we can think of a couple of kids right now that they've worked with that are internalizing. And that's the kids we've talked about, and those are the ones that really take most of our attention. But I think as well, it's important to look at internalizing as well. Kids that are more socially withdrawn, that have social skills deficits, that are anxious, that are inhibited, those kids as well, I think, need to be addressed as far as later behavioral issues. And we have the opportunity when kids are young, if we can do proper assessment, to provide this intervention. So why screen young children? Why actually go out there? And this is kind of a summary, I think. But, is it because the indicators of problem behavior are evident in preschoolers? Is it that problem behaviors progress from low intensity to more high intensity? We should screen young children because early intervention reduces the chance for later problems and cost effective, or all the above.
So I've launched the poll. I didn't want to do it while you're reading because I don't know if that will interrupt your screen, but as everyone is voting, looks like majority say all of above, 92%. A couple people are saying early intervention reduces the chance for later problems, but majority say all of the above. And nobody says indicators of problem behaviors or problem behavior progressing from low to high intensity.
Well, so my answer, at least the answer that I presented, was all the above, but all of those things. I think with that great percent, I think that so far I've done my job as far as talking with folks. And I know this is, again, preaching to the choir, but taking this information, being able to go out there and talk to your peers and tell them why assessment is important, is because it can lead to intervention, and that early intervention reduces the chances for later problems. So talking about the RTI framework, can folks see the entire pyramid now?
I can see it, so I imagine everybody else can.
Great. So in the RTI framework, it's also looked at as an adaptation of a public health approach, is that you have some systems or some interventions that are for all kids, and that's the green part right here in the bottom. Oops. Sorry about that. So right here in the green part, that's for all kids. And, interventions like that, school-wide support systems, positive behavior support systems, those work for about 80 to 90% of the kids. So about 85% of the kids are just going to do going to do great. It's going to promote positive interventions, that it's going to promote positive behaviors. But some of those interventions, social skills, teaching social behavioral expectations, positive reinforcement systems for everyone, some of that's not going to be enough for all the kids. And so for those kids, these more at-risk students, right here, that's about 7 to 10%. And those are going to need more intensive interventions. First Step to Success is a project that Andy and I are working on specifically for these more selected or middle kids. And then here, but then even that intervention, some require more than that. So looking at, more functional assessment, individual behavior management, parent training, and PMTO is parent management. For a few of those kids, about 3 to 5%, you're going to need that, but they're just a few. So the interventions are going to be much more intensive and much more costly at this point. So these 3 levels of intervention also relate to 3 levels of assessment as well. So looking at assessment, you've got assessment systems for all the kids in the classrooms, for all of them. And then you're going to have some assessment systems that are going to be more targeted. And then a few assessment systems that are going to be very intensive. And so, for example, you might rank the entire classroom and looking at the entire classroom along externalizing and internalizing dimensions. But that only some of those kids you're going to go in and do rating scales on. And that could be the child behavior checklist, some other measures that we're going to be talking about, but more kind of slightly raising the amount of intensity. And then for some kids, you're going to be doing observations and more intensive, in the classroom that are very costly, very intensive, but they require that for more assessment. And so these 3 levels of the RTI framework fit into assessment as well as to intervention. And if we look at intervention now, as well, we have the opportunity here in the preschool age range to look at prevention. When you get to later grades, to 4th, 5th, and 6th, we can do some remediation. We can do social skills, more instruction, family support. But really, when you start getting to the later grades, it's just accommodation. And we're talking about survival skills, vocational skills, more coping skills here. But at this point, we can do more prevention. So looking at this RTI framework, for assessment of all kids, we can do some nice prevention work here. And all of these things, all of these levels at their early grades are going to be much more effective. And I think communicating that to your peers and asking, why are we filling out all these forms and going through all this process, that there's a reason behind that. Teachers are great sources of information. They can create, they can compare child's behaviors. I think of teachers having a little normal curve inside their head even. So I'm really excited about being able to use that. And parents are great too, but they don't have that same normative sense. So that's why we start with teachers with a lot of our assessments and then move on to parents because they don't have that same normative sense. The different types of methods that we have, rating scales like we mentioned, child behavior checklists, direct observations. Those are great because they actually have their multiple sources, so it increases triangulation, and cultural sensitivity because we're looking within the child. And then we've got progress monitoring, which is important too because you might be able to do an assessment at one point. But if you're looking at especially PBIS or more program-wide pieces, you can have multiple times for rating. I am actually going to briefly talk about methodological issues. It's important to have validity, triangulation, multiple sources of information, and cultural sensitivity, but I would really encourage you to look at the article to get more information on that, just because we don't have a lot of time right now. So I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Andy Frey right now.
Thanks, Ed. Hello, everybody. And I'm going to boogie. This was organized in my part was organized in 3 different sections. I was going to kind of do a couple little foundation work, then highlight 2 different types of screening and assessment tools, and then talk about a process. But because I don't want because I want time for questions at the end, I'm probably going to skip that 3rd section, the process, but it is in the book, in the chapter if people want to look with that. And Ed has control of the slideshow, so if you hear me saying forward or back, it's because I don't have the control. And Ed, feel free to use your little pen to highlight and circle stuff. That's very cool. So as Ed said, multiple sources, multiple methods of assessment and intervention are the most accurate and effective. Anything that we do is ultimately, if it's just one piece of information, it's limited in its utility. To the extent that we're able to use different sources, whether it's a checklist and an observation, a checklist and an interview with someone, and those are the methods, and then different sources, because of course kids' behavior can look very different in different settings, home, school, community, and sometimes the behavior looks the same, but people's perceptions of that behavior are very different. So the more information you have, the more confidence you have that you're getting a full picture. All right, Ed, go ahead forward. You know, let's go ahead and, can we skip the poll just in the interest of time? Christine, is that acceptable? Very good. Awesome. So the first example is of the early screening project. It's adapted from the systematic screening for behavior disorders, which was a similar system that was used and has been very popular for the last decade and a half or more in elementary schools. It's a multiple gated screening instrument specifically for preschoolers, and you see a web address there that should you want more information on it, you can get it, and I'm going to describe some of the pieces here. Go ahead forward, Ed. The ESP has good psychometric data, and if you're familiar with that term, great. If you're not, there's more information in the book, and basically what it means is people that know instrumentation in the population very well have studied it for a long time, and they can be confident that you're actually measuring what you are intending to measure. And one of the pieces of the ESP that's particularly impressive is that it has a low false diagnosis rate. Any instrument's going to have some error in it. A particular kind of error that can be concerning is if you're identifying kids at risk that are not really at risk. All the measures are going to have that, but the ESP has a pretty low rate compared to other measures. All right, forward. So this is a visual depiction of the 3 gates that are involved in the early screening project. The first two involve you get information from the teacher, and the third is a behavior observation system. And the next slide is more of the same, but I'm going to talk from it. So if you wouldn't mind going forward, Ed, there, perfect. So ESP, what I love about it, I'm a mental health consultant at an early childhood in a Head Start program, and so I know well the balance between using something that is a known, valid, reliable measure and balancing that with practical issues like the financial aspects of measurement and even more importantly time. So this is a very efficient way to screen all kids in a class or in a program in a relatively short period of time. And here's what you're able to do with the early screening project. At stage 1, you go in and you simply ask the teacher to bring a class list, give them some examples of externalizing behavior. Kids with, they nominate the 5 kids in their class that they have the most concerns about for externalizing behavior problems and internalizing behavior problems, and we haven't talked about that. But externalizing is pretty much those kids that act outwardly. Aggression would be an example of that, and then internalizers are those kids that act inwardly. Those would be more along the lines of anxiety issues or depression issues that are maybe not quite as obvious, or at least not as problematic in the classroom. Teachers nominate 5 kids in each of those categories, and then they rank order them. Just their gut feeling with regard to who's the most severe of those 5 to the least severe. Then they go on to stage 2, and at this point they complete brief checklists, critical events checklist, social interactive checklist, aggressive behavior, adaptive behavior, and maladaptive behavior. And these are all brief, about 10 items on each of those. They do those for each of the 3 highest ranked kids in those categories. Then you compare them to the national norms, and you get a sense for which kids' behaviors are higher, and therefore place them in an at-risk or a highly at-risk category. And then in stage 3, for those kids that need the most, that exceed those national cutoff norms, you can collect additional ratings from the parent, and there's a direct observation system. So in an efficient way, it takes you pretty rapidly through all kids in a classroom or in a program. Forward, Ed. Thank you, sir. All right, very good. And so this is just within that the manual for the ESP, you can see how that how you convert the teacher's information into gets calculated into a raw score, which gets compared against a risk status criteria. All right, forward. This is an example of the items that are measured. I'm going to want to get to the second piece as well. Here we are. Very good. So the ESP is more of a traditional screener where it is done at one point in time to get a read on which kids are doing all right, which ones are at risk, and which ones might be more severely at risk. The Behavior Incident Reporting System, the -NH is New Hampshire, is a way to collect for programs to collect data on behavior incidents, which is pretty much the equivalent of an office referral for elementary school kids that has become extremely popular tool for collecting and analyzing data within elementary and middle and high schools. But as you know, most early childhood programs don't have that same type of sending to the office structure. So the behavior incident reporting system is one, it's a web-based system. So as you'll see with some of the slides that we have, it's very easy, and it's easy for people to enter data, and then easy to process reports in a user-friendly fashion so that data can be used for programmatic decision making. It's flexible. It can be used as a screening, like the ESP. So you could just simply you could use it at the beginning of the year to identify kids that require additional intervention, and then it is a progress monitoring tool because you can analyze the data that you collect as frequently as you would like. And we have some examples. Next slide, Ed, if you don't mind, that I'll run through quickly, but just to give you a sense for how this data can generate information that would be useful. So when there's a behavior incident in a class, teachers would log into a system and they would fill out some information, and then this information you can generate different types of reports that can to give you a better sense for what's going on, where it's going on, when it's going on, and who it's going on with. This is an example of the type of challenging behavior. So if this was your program, you could look at this information and you can see along the bottom, 5 incidents during this time period of September through the middle of December: running away, verbal aggression, disruption or tantruming, and then it gives you the frequency. So you can get a quick read on just what are the behavior problems within your program or even at a classroom level that are most problematic. All right, go ahead, Ed. Next slide, please. Nice job with the visuals. Same structure here, but this is across the time of day, so you can see what time of day are the majority of are the behavior problems isolated or at least more or less frequent at different times of day. All right, next slide. Here is by routine. So again, specific to preschool preschool activities. Is it happening during circle time? Is it upon arrival? Outdoor play? Again, this type of information is critical for programs to understand what's going on in the program with regard to challenging behavior, and then also to support teachers, with professional development. It helps it become much more targeted and much more data-driven. All right, next slide. Same thing. This gives you the students. Here's where you would identify the students that are most having the most troubles and which ones would need additional support, and then further progress monitoring. Next slide. And then this is another one for incidents by behavior. Go ahead, next slide. All right, so these are the same, except for what you're seeing now are much prettier. These are the actual web face. This is the more current stuff, and Howard Muscott, who's the developer of the system, has been sending me updated slides over the course of the last 24 hours that I'm forwarding to Ed to put these in here. So go ahead, Ed, fast forward through these. These next few slides that Ed's going to run through quickly are it's the exact same information, but this is the prettier interface that is currently what you would get if you were to become part of this system.
And I apologize. I messed up on my placement. Sorry about that, Andy.
Hey, no sweat at all. Glad we got some of the pretty ones in here. And thank you, Howard. Go ahead, and you can run through these to the next one. Really want to get to, and go ahead, skip all these. I want to just go to the future. Where do we go from here? So we're in a huge transition in screening and assessment. We've gone from not using data. Pretty much we get referrals from teachers and parents who request it, and of course that's not all that systematic, and then we move to more data-based decision making, and we use more of a traditional assessment where we would assess them at the beginning of the year, get a read on where they are, and if you're lucky, you did it at the end of the year to see if they made any progress. And now we're moving towards progress monitoring, which is more frequent, at a minimum 3 to 4 times a year, sometimes more. And of course, if you're going to do that, it has to be far less time consuming than these measures. So you're seeing a change in measurement whereby you're getting outcomes that are a little bit more practical, and they're more sensitive to short-term change. And then the next piece is the data. The technology that's available now is just revolutionizing what we're able to do, because before, one of the and get it into a format that's usable. And now, as you can see with the behavior incident reporting system, technology is available, so that happens very seamlessly and very efficiently. And so I think that the behavior incident reporting system is on the very front end of that curve, and what you're going to see is the measures that people have traditionally relied on are getting redone, they're getting shortened, they're getting put into technology so that people can use them in a progress monitoring fashion, and the ESP is no exception. Ed's in the process of getting that ESP online system functional. And then the next trend I think we're kind of in the middle of, and we'll see over the course of the next few years, is the integration of the academic and the behavioral domains. Right now those are largely separate except for a few isolated type programs, and I think those are all going to start coming together again so that you can collect data. Data entry is not an issue, and the ability to analyze it and present it in a way that is meaningful to teachers and parents and other program staff has high utility. All right, what's next, Ed? I think we're getting to the end, and good thing because there's a couple of slides. Did you want to say anything else about the research on the ESP?
No, just to give a plug if folks are interested to send me an email.
Cool. And if Howard's out there listening and wants to give a plug for if you'd send that to Christine, I bet you she would put that up so that people could know how to access that. And there's also easily found on the web for the behavior incident reporting system. Sorry about the grandfather clock you're hearing in the background. It beats the hammering of the roof, which was what was occurring when I got to Macon. So this was planned for me to come home. Yeah, so this might be interesting. Let's do this, and then we'll go. Then Christine has a couple of slides, and we'll take some time to have questions. I know that people were probably counting on the top of the hour. I know that I'm able to stay. If people are able to stay longer, I don't know if that's feasible, Christina, from the system standpoint.
So I have launched the poll, and majority of people do use progress monitoring. Looks like about 70% use it. And 11% say no, but it's being talked about. So majority yes, and some no, and some thinking about it.
Excellent. Very good.
And I did, Howard did respond with some information, the behavior incident reporting check-in system. Howard, if you have a web address, I can share it with the audience. Well, I'll shoot that out.
For you to do a couple slides and then facilitate questions, is that correct?
Yep. Yep, that sounds great.
Cool. Great, thank you.
Do you, sorry, do you have the slides? Oh, okay. Okay, so yes, the webinar series that we are, as you know, hosting will continue on Monday with a presentation on implementing RTI at the state level. And then we're going to round out the fall series with a presentation on addressing the learning needs of young dual language learners next Monday, the 4th. So if you have not registered for those and you're interested, I encourage you to visit the link on your slide to register. And then we're going to continue our RTI and early childhood webinar series in the spring, and those topics are to be announced. So I am sure we will somehow send you an announcement for registration in case you may be interested. And then the book that Dr. Frey and Dr. Feil keep talking about is the Handbook of Responsive Intervention in Early Childhood. And as a thank you for joining us, we want to extend a 20% discount on this book. So if you are interested in ordering, you can get a 20% discount using the code RTI EC20. And so you have some time to use that. It expires next June. So a lot of great information, especially from our presenters today. So you should take advantage. And then I want to now turn to questions from our audience. If anybody has any questions, you can submit them now, and I will feed them to our presenters for them to share their answers. My chat box is filled with everybody's role and program, so I have to sort through that. Oh, and while people may be thinking about their questions. I did get the contact information for the Burgess system. Let me see if I can figure out a way to send it through the chat box rather than verbally saying it in case you... Here we go. So I just sent it out through the chat box, the information. There's a web address or an email address and a phone number for anybody who would like to contact Howard. Doesn't look like we have any questions. I think you guys had a very comprehensive, informative presentation. That's what I'm getting.
So clear.
So clear. Oh, thank you for putting that in the slide.
Everybody. This is the end.
Yeah,
Yes.
thanks very much, everybody. This was
If anybody thinks of
I saw a lot of nods.
So if anybody thinks of any questions after the presentation is over, feel free to send those to me, and I will get in touch and send answers back to you. But if nobody has anything, and Dr. Frey and Dr. Feil, if you don't have anything else to add, I will thank you all for joining us. Do you guys have anything to add or no?
Nope, just thanks to everybody for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, I hope to see you all on the next webinar.